Humans are not afraid of death, but only of non-existence. Death is just a form of non-existence. Chapter 1: Existence and Eternal Life. Life is incredibly precious, yet it is also incredibly fragile. No one wants to die, but no one is exempt from death. This fact creates a contradiction in human nature, since, as discussed in the first two articles in the theory, all human actions, thoughts, and emotions are aimed at survival. Yet humans are destined to die. Doesn't this make our effort to avoid death seem meaningless? Therefore, the fear of death is theoretically unavoidable. If one wishes to overcome the fear of death, there is only one way to achieve eternal life. Only with eternal life can people fully satisfy their survival needs, making their interests limitless. But this is impossible. However, while the human body cannot achieve eternal life, it can be done on another level. Contrary to traditional narratives, I refer to my individual self, quote unquote, as a big I, because this self is the subject. In contrast to the big I, there is the little me. This refers to the extinction of the big I, which is the object reflecting the existence of the big I. For example, when you're building with blocks, when you complete a block structure, you feel proud because it represents your ability and is a manifestation of your vitality. Even if you're not physically present, when others see the structure, they will still recognize that you are impressive for creating such a fine piece. This structure is your little me. Through the creation of the little me, you can achieve a certain form of internal life. For example, although you may have died, your work remains in the world. As long as your work exists, so do you. And this is a form of existence. Therefore, creating a little me can also be called objectification, projecting the existence of the big I onto an object. We can then say that humans are not so much afraid of dying, but rather the non-existence. Death is merely a form of non-existence. Chapter 2: Big I and Little Me. It's not just humans who face this dilemma. Any living being will encounter this contradiction. However, when I studied paleontology, I discovered a solution to this dilemma: reproduction. In the narrative of paleontology, a species is often categorized as one entity representing all individuals of that species that appeared on Earth. For example, when discussing the evolution history of trilobites, paleontologists might say the trilobite started with this form, later developed a thick armor, and eventually went extinct due to that thick armor. It's as though throughout such a long time span, there was only one trilobite, and that trilobite represented the entire history of the species. It's like this: although a single trilobite dies, as long as it reproduces and the entire species continues, it's as if it is still alive. Many present-day organisms follow the same pattern. Many animals die after giving birth, as though their entire life's purpose was to have offspring. In fact, in ancient times, many people believed that the purpose of life was simply to carry on the bloodline, and many people today still hold this belief. According to the theory we mentioned earlier, this child can be seen as the little me of the parents. The child represents the parents continuing to exist in some form. However, more and more people today do not believe the purpose of life is merely to have children. As they pursue more diverse and complex goals, this proves one point: having children is just one form of life's meaning. Now let's look at what other forms share common traits. For example, in the book The Moon and Sixpence by Mom, the protagonist is willing to sacrifice everything for painting, making painting the meaning of his life. Similarly, there are writers spend their entire life writing one famous book, making that book the meaning of their lives. Albert Einstein dedicated his life to study the relativity, making the research his life's meaning. Vladimir Lenin dedicated his life to the Russian Revolution, and that revolutionary cause was the meaning of his life. Of course, there are less grand and even quite mundane examples. For instance, Peter's lifelong goal was to attend Harvard University. Once he succeeded, he would tell everyone he was at Harvard, making that achievement his life's meaning. Or Lois believed that her partner is her entire world, making that relationship the meaning of her life. There are many more examples, and attentive readers have likely observed quite a few. In short, the meaning of life we mentioned earlier is essentially the little me. These different meanings of life are, at their core, ways of creating a little me to achieve eternal life. In other words, they are all still about serving the interest of the big I. Chapter 3: The Depth and Breadth of the Little Me. The expression of the little me takes many forms, but everyone seeks to expand both the depth and breadth of their little me. Let's first talk about breadth. For example, if I help someone, like giving a homeless person $1, then at that moment, that homeless person becomes my little me. This action reflects my value and significance. However, this little me is fragile because only one person has benefited from my help, which is a very small number. To counter the powerful fear of death, I need more little me's, more objectification. If I help 10 people, I'll feel that these people have formed a community of shared interest with me, and I gain emotional value and reputation. Thus, my little me becomes stronger. If I help 100 or 1,000 people, my little me becomes even stronger. For instance, if a country's mayor is loved by all the peoples in the country, then everyone in that country will be spontaneously support him, becoming part of his little me. If I contributed to all of humanity, benefiting future generations, then these people will remember my good deeds and become my little me, making me incredibly strong. Even if I die for the benefit of all humanity, as long as humanity exists, I will still persist in some form. Now let's talk about the depth. If I simply give a homeless person $1, I might feel good for the day, but I will forget about it in the next day. But if I become close friends with him, my little me in him will become stronger. When I am with him, the fear of loneliness will be alleviated. If I create a community of shared interest with him, he becomes almost like another version of myself. When one little me becomes nearly identical to the big I, then it becomes incredibly powerful for the big I. It's like a famous relationship between the ancient musician in China, Bo Ya, and his friend Zhong Ziqi. For Bo Ya, Zhong Ziqi was another big I. When Zhong Ziqi died, Bo Ya felt as if he had died too, and that's why Bo Ya destroyed his piano. Or think of comrades in a trench. When you entrust your lives to each other, which is why comrades often form extremely deep friendships from the wars. In summary, breadth means having as many little me's as possible, while depth refers to the equality of the little me's, where the connection is closer and the interests more intertwined. If all humanity were to form a community of shared interests, then every individual's little me will reach its ultimate limit in both breadth and depth. Now, some readers might wonder, earlier the article discussed how death triggers the selfish instinct. You can see my first podcast of this series. But here it seems to suggest that death triggers altruistic instinct, which appears contradictory. Actually, there's no contradiction. The theory in this article doesn't suggest that merely helping others creates a little me. As I mentioned before, the little me is essentially a way to reflect one's value. For example, if I help someone and I feel incredibly moved by my own action, and that can be a form of little me. I'm not expecting anything in return from this other person. I'm simply moved by my own actions. However, if I help someone to see them thanking me or see them finding joy through my help, and I don't get the reaction I was hoping for, I won't feel happy or validated. Thus, I won't be able to create a little me. For example, if I give a beggar $1 and he complains it's too little and asks for more, I will not feel a sense of self-worth. In fact, I may even feel that my self-worth has been denied, which can make me feel bad. Ultimately, these actions are primarily for one's own benefit. If the action does not yield the expected benefits, people won't do it. Psychologically, there's a theory that suggests giving is essentially about control. The giver hopes to control the other person through the guilt. On the surface, this behavior seems altruistic, but in reality, it's actually selfish.